We've got to make sure that we're investing in the skills and training for people in the UK. We saw that really big increase in net migration in the space of just 4 years, while overseas recruitment shot up at the same time as skills and training in the UK were cut. And that's what we're determined to turn around.
Indeed. So we are living in partial island of strangers then?
Well, I think we're a country that I think has a really strong country.
Are we or are we not an island of strangers, do you think?
No, I think we're a country where everybody, I think, wants to see a strong country where we train people in the UK, but also to see net migration come down. I think that makes sense.
Why can't we get a figure of where you want to get to with net migration? To parrot a phrase from my school days, where's your cap?
So there's a reason we're taking a very different approach from the approach the Conservatives have taken. And what they did was they really let net migration shoot up. They ended up with this free market experiment, but they did so and set all kinds of different targets that ended up just not being met, not being taken seriously, and as a result undermined the entire credibility of the whole system. And I think that's the real problem. It's undermined confidence in it, and so that's why we're taking a very different approach.
If you want to talk about credibility, by the time the Prime Minister stood up yesterday, 2 boats had arrived in Dover. Yesterday, the total number of boats arriving in one day was 7, and around 400 plus people arrived. That takes the figure already this year to north of 12,000. How's your smashing the gangs going?
Nobody should be making that dangerous journey. It is undermining our border security and it is putting lives at risk. That is clearly
sadly,
deeply
someone
dangerous.
Lost their life yesterday, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, exactly.
So how is smashing the gangs going?
So yesterday evening we passed through Parliament the border security bill, and that means that has gone now through the House of Commons. That is bringing in counter-terrorism style powers in order to go after the criminal gangs and in order to make sure that we can have additional powers to be able to go after those gangs who are making huge profits from this huge vile trade in people.
Well, it's not working
is deeply
yet,
damaging.
So will it change now that bill has passed? So we can now look forward to
the House of Commons.
Yes, we're coming to high season for this. You'll be aware of that, Home Secretary.
Sadly, the Conservatives and Reform voted against those powers. I think that was deeply irresponsible of them, because we need those counter-terrorism powers to go after the criminal gangs. And it's gone through the House of Commons. It needs to now go through the House of Lords and then come into force. The other thing we've been doing is working very closely with France in order to strengthen their work and in order to get the French to intervene in French waters. They have now committed to do that. They need to do that over the next few months. Yes. We are hoping that will come into force, because that is critical. We need boats to be prevented from crossing.
Home Secretary, haven't we? £500 million is how much we sent to the French. What have we got to that so far? What have we got?
So we now have the French operations along the coast and along the shoreline. But what we're seeing now from the criminal gangs is the boats launch further upstream. People get onto them in the water. Once everybody is in the water, the French authorities do not intervene. That is a serious problem. As soon as it's in the water, their rules meant they weren't taking action. That's a serious problem. So the UK governments have been asking France to change their position for very many years, and they have now finally agreed to do so as a result of the work we've been doing with them. That is important, but it's not in force yet. So don't get me wrong, this continues to be a really deep-rooted problem, because those criminal gangs have had 6 years to take very deep roots. But we need that French action in the waters, not just on the coast, and we also need the broader counter-terrorism powers that we're bringing in.
So what I'm hearing, Home Secretary, is that we've spent £500 million, but nothing's actually happening with that yet. We're going to smash the gangs, we've got a border force, but we haven't got the legislation. What is actually being actively done now? It would seem nothing.
So the new counter-terrorism powers, I think, are important, and they are coming through. We've set up the new Border Security Command, which is strengthening the work and the investigations with France and with Germany. But as you know, Nick, these criminal gangs have had 6 years to take deep roots, and they exploit the weather as well. So we've seen the different patterns depending on the weather, and our border security should not be dependent on the weather. That is why it's so important to bring these counter-terrorism powers in.
OK. When will we see the gangs starting to be smashed?
We want to see this progress as rapidly as possible
but when
because
do you
it
think
is
that
so
will be?
damaging. So we hope that the work that the French are doing means that they will start taking action within French waters over the next few months. I think that is hugely important. We're obviously pressing them to do that as swiftly as possible. And then the counter-terrorism powers will come in later this year. At each stage, we are increasing the enforcement, the work with other countries, the work with Europol on these gang networks, because they do spread right across Europe as well.
All right. Sir Keir seems to have been on quite a journey, doesn't he? Can I take you back to 2020 during the leadership campaign?
We need to make the wider case on immigration. We welcome migrants. We don't scapegoat them. Low wages, poor housing, poor public services are not the fault of migrants and people who've come here. They're political failure. Political failure. So we have to make the case for the benefits of migration, the benefits of free movement.
Could you be clear about Keir? Because that's rather contrary to some of what he said yesterday, Home Secretary.
Well, what he said 3 years ago in a speech to the Confederation of British Industry was that there is a real problem with employers continually recruiting from abroad rather than training here at home. That was 5 years ago when
he was running to be leader, though. That I
but he has been saying for very many years that we've got a real problem. Well, we've had a very big increase in overseas recruitment, and we've also seen training in the UK cut. We've seen this big increase in low-skilled recruitment from overseas at the same time as we've seen fewer UK residents in work or training here. That is a problem. That is a dysfunctional free market experiment that the Conservatives ran. That has been very damaging. And Keir has been talking about that for years. He has been saying we need to bring net migration down, we need to have a fair and controlled system. And he's also been talking about the benefits and the value that people who have come to the UK through very many years have made. That's what he said yesterday. That's what he said in the CBI speech. That's what he said through the years.
But in 2020, he backed, and I quote, more safe and legal routes for people to join family members rather than risk crossing the Channel. So he's gone from 5 years for safe and legal routes to making sure you do language classes.
Well,
it wouldn't be down to reform, would it, Home Secretary?
Well, the UK's always done its bit. Things like the Ukraine programme, the Afghan resettlement scheme for those who helped our armed forces, and of course with Hong Kong. All of those are things that Keir has backed. All of those are things that Labour has backed, and rightly that is us doing our bit as we have always done. Right. But he has also been saying for years, and we put it in our manifesto, that we need to bring net migration down because it went up fourfold in the space of 4 years. So this is about the Labour government implementing its manifesto. It's about us doing it in a serious, sensible way. Identifying the areas where you've got high levels of overseas recruitment that we should be training here in the UK, and currently we're not. So we're increasing the immigration skills charge and the employers pay when they recruit from overseas, and that will be put into increasing training in the UK.
All right, last minute or so together, you talk about training. Obviously, this could affect the care home sector. Some people are saying that this actually will lead to devastation. There's about 130,000 jobs. Why will people living in the UK train to work when they haven't before? How will the care sector cope with this?
Well, part of the issues in the care sector is also about paying conditions. It's why we need a fair pay agreement in social care. And also to recognise that what happened when we had this really big increase in social care recruitment from overseas, because that visa has only been in place for just a few years, but a huge increase in overseas recruitment. And what it led to was also very substantial exploitation. Proper checks weren't done. And when they finally were, around nearly 40,000 care workers who'd come to the UK found that actually the jobs didn't really exist. Those care workers, we're saying that care employers should be recruiting from those care workers who have been displaced and from people who are here on other visas and from UK residents paid for with as part of a fair pay agreement.
Why would UK residents seek to get involved in the care sector now when they've not done it before?
Well, I don't think, Nick, that we can just continually return to immigration as being the answer
I
to
agree
every
with you,
part
but
of the labour market where there are problems, instead of actually dealing with those problems. Some of the problems in the care sector we know is about the shift patterns. It's about the way in which workers are treated in some sections of the care sector. There's others where people are treated really well and employees are really looked after, but we know there are some that just aren't.
Finally,
and it's really important they follow their fair pay agreement, and we raise standards here in the UK rather than continually turning to migration as the answer, rather than tackling those core problems.
Just briefly, a lot of my listeners, as this is one from David, can you ask the Home Secretary, will there be transition agreements for those who are already in the UK, are on a 3-year global talent visa or a 5-year skilled worker visa on a path to ILR? Will the goalposts be moved for them? That is, effectively, you understand, will they start again? So, the procedural matter for a lot of my listeners who are themselves or have wives and husbands involved, what is the reality, Home Secretary?
So people continue to be able to extend existing visas that they have got, and we're also going to consult on the rules around settlement and citizenship, because those will be changing, but we'll need to have a consultation on the details of those.
OK, I know you can't say much, but a word on what I understand is the arrest concerning a possible arson attack on the Prime Minister's personal residence, Home Secretary.
Well, the police have my full support in their investigation. As you know, we have excellent police teams who do this expert work. The Prime Minister's thanked the emergency services, but as you say, I obviously can't, as Home Secretary, comment on an ongoing investigation into this incident, but I am being kept briefed.
Grateful for your time and the background to what was brought in yesterday. Home Secretary YvetteCooper appearing here on LBC, where it's got to 2 minutes after 8. We need the headlines. Dominic Ellis.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, a man has been arrested in connection with a series of fires at homes linked to the Prime Minister. The Metropolitan Police say a suspect was detained in the early hours of this morning. Our reporter Henry Riley